Before we start, you should know this story is very serious. The following is for learning and fun only. This is the real story from Sean Diddy Combs' trial as told by legal reporters. If you want to know more about this big story that has changed everything about this famous case, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates as this story keeps going. The Southern District of New York Federal Courthouse saw something crazy today when secret security video showing Sean Diddy Combs and rapper Meek Mill was suddenly shown as evidence. The video was reportedly taken at the Four Seasons Hotel in Los Angeles in 2016 and was shown during what was supposed to be a normal court hearing in the ongoing case against the music star. As the video played on courtroom screens, the calm court atmosphere turned into chaos. Many people gasped out loud and jurors visibly pulled back. Judge Raymond Delaney, known for his strict courtroom rules, looked shocked for a moment before calling for order. Diddy, who had stayed calm during previous court sessions, physically slumped in his chair. His lawyers frantically passed notes as they realized how bad this new evidence was. The video, which prosecutors said was completely real and unchanged, appears to go against sworn statements previously given by both Combs and Mill about their professional relationship and specific events related to the case. More importantly, according to legal experts in the courtroom, it potentially connects Combs directly to activities central to the most serious charges he currently faces. What makes this development particularly important isn't just what the video shows, but where it came from. The video was reportedly given to federal investigators by an anonymous source within the hotel's security team who had kept a personal copy despite alleged attempts to have all records of the interaction removed from official systems shortly after it happened. This isn't simply another shocking moment in an already high-profile trial. It represents a potential turning point in the prosecution's case, introducing concrete visual evidence where previously they had relied mainly on testimony that defense attorneys had worked systematically to discredit. The full story begins with how this footage stayed hidden for years, what exactly it reveals about the relationship between these prominent industry figures, and why its sudden appearance in court today may have permanently changed the outcome of one of the most closely watched criminal cases in recent entertainment history. The atmosphere in courtroom 14B of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse had settled into the methodical rhythm typical of complex federal cases by their third week. The initial media frenzy had calmed down into more focused coverage with a consistent group of legal reporters sitting in the designated press section. Security procedures had become routine, and even the arrival of high-profile defendant Sean Diddy Combs no longer created the stir it had during early proceedings. This Wednesday morning began with the standard protocol. Judge Raymond Delaney, a 64-year-old veteran judge known for his methodical approach and intolerance for rule-breaking, entered precisely at 9. The 12 jurors and 4 alternates took their seats with notebooks ready. Prosecution and defense teams arranged their materials with practiced efficiency at their respective tables. Diddy arrived wearing a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and subdued tie, a carefully constructed image of business respectability that replaced his flashy public persona since the charges were filed. He acknowledged his legal team with a brief nod before taking a seat, his expression revealing nothing of the internal pressure he surely felt as the defendant in a case that could potentially result in decades of imprisonment. Lead prosecutor Alina Michaels, a seasoned federal attorney with a reputation for careful preparation, had indicated the previous day that this session would focus on establishing the timeline of specific events alleged in counts 3 through 7 of the charges. The proceedings were expected to be technically focused but relatively routine. The methodical building of the government's case through financial records, communication logs, and witness confirmation. Your Honor, the government calls Special Agent Thomas Rizzo, Michaels announced, beginning what the assembled observers expected would be another day of step-by-step case building. Rizzo, a digital forensics specialist with the FBI Financial Crimes Section, took the stand and was sworn in. After establishing his credentials and expertise, Michaels led him through prepared questions about data recovery methods and chain of custody procedures, foundational testimony to authenticate evidence that would follow. It was approximately 40 minutes into this testimony when Michaels shifted in a direction that caught the attention of everyone in the courtroom. Agent Rizzo, I'd like to direct your attention to evidence item 47C, which was recently added to the government's exhibit list pursuant to the court's ruling on late discovered evidence. Can you explain how this item came into the possession of federal investigators? Defense counsel immediately objected, citing inadequate notice and procedural concerns. Judge Delaney called both teams to the bench for a sidebar discussion that lasted nearly 15 minutes, with increasingly animated but hushed exchanges between the attorneys. When they returned to their positions, the judge addressed the courtroom. I have reviewed the government's motion regarding this evidence and the defense's objections. While the timing is irregular, the evidence meets the criteria for late discovery under federal rules. The prosecution has established legitimate reasons for its delayed introduction, and the defense will be granted adequate time to examine the evidence and prepare any challenges to its authenticity or relevance. The objection is overruled and we will proceed. This ruling immediately changed the energy in the courtroom. Defense attorneys huddled in urgent consultation. Diddy leaned forward, his previous composure showing the first cracks as he whispered intensely to his lead counsel. Journalists straightened in their seats, suddenly alert to the possibility that routine proceedings had transformed into something potentially significant. Agent Rizzo explained that on April 17th, approximately 3 weeks earlier, the FBI had received an anonymous package containing a USB drive and a handwritten letter. The letter claimed to be from a former security employee of the Four Seasons Hotel in Los Angeles who stated they had kept a personal copy of security footage from August 14, 2016, despite instructions to delete all records of the interaction it captured. Following standard protocols for anonymous evidence, Rizzo testified, "We conducted forensic authentication of the digital content and pursued verification through independent channels. We were able to confirm the footage is genuine security video from the stated location and date." As Michaels requested permission to play the video for the court, the atmosphere tensed further. Judge Delaney instructed court officers to ensure all recording devices were disabled, reminding attendees of the strict prohibitions against creating unauthorized records of evidence presentation. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as monitors positioned for viewing by the judge, jury, attorneys, and defendant displayed the FBI evidence designation screen. What followed would transform not just this day's proceedings, but potentially the entire trajectory of the case against one of music's most powerful figures. It started like any other day in the ongoing trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The room buzzed with low conversations as attorneys organized documents and court personnel prepared for the day's proceedings. The case had been methodically advancing through financial evidence, with prosecutors establishing patterns of transactions and communications they alleged constituted racketeering, money laundering, and other federal offenses. But when Special Agent Thomas Rizzo mentioned evidence item 47CA, the room changed. Defense attorneys who had been reviewing documents suddenly looked up, their postures shifting from routine attention to alert concern. Diddy, who had maintained composed confidence throughout previous sessions, straightened in his chair, leaning toward his legal team with evident urgency. The judge raised an eyebrow at the prosecution's introduction of previously undisclosed evidence, calling an immediate sidebar. The intense discussion at the bench, though conducted in hushed tones, featured unusually animated gestures from both legal teams. When they returned to their positions, Judge Delaney's ruling to admit the evidence sent a ripple of anticipation through the courtroom. Diddy's lead attorney James Harrington appeared visibly displeased, making a show of documenting his continuing objection for the record. Your Honor, while we respect the court's ruling, we maintain that introducing evidence of this nature without adequate time for review fundamentally disadvantages the defense and potentially prejudices the jury. Judge Delaney acknowledged the objection but remained firm. Your concerns are noted, counsel. However, the court is satisfied that the prosecution has met the burden for late introduction under federal rules. You will have time to examine this evidence thoroughly before cross-examination continues. As Agent Rizzo described the source of the video evidence, Diddy's previously confident demeanor continued to erode. He passed notes to his attorneys with increasing frequency, his expressions cycling between concern and what courtroom observers described as growing alarm. The relationship between Diddy and Meek Mill had been peripherally relevant to the case from its early stages. Prosecution had previously introduced evidence of financial transactions between Combs' businesses and entities connected to the Philadelphia rapper, characterizing them as part of a larger pattern of suspicious money movement. Defense had consistently maintained these were legitimate business dealings between music industry colleagues with overlapping professional interests. Both men had submitted sworn statements describing their relationship as primarily professional with occasional social interaction. Diddy had specifically testified during grand jury proceedings that he had never conducted private business meetings with Mill without others present, characterizing their connection as industry-standard artist-executive relations. Mill, who was not a defendant in the case but had been identified as a potential witness, had provided a sworn statement supporting this characterization. He stated explicitly that he had never attended private meetings with Mr. Combs in hotel settings, and that all their interactions had been standard music industry business conducted in appropriate professional contexts. To view the newly introduced footage, prosecutor Alina Michaels provided context that directly challenged these statements. "What you are about to see," she explained, "is security footage from the Four Seasons Hotel in Los Angeles recorded on August 14, 2016. It shows the defendant Sean Combs entering a suite at approximately 11:42 p.m., followed 17 minutes later by Robert Williams, known professionally as Meek Mill. The footage then shows various individuals entering and exiting over a 3-hour period, including several who have been identified as relevant to counts 4 and 6 of the indictment." She continued, "Most significantly, at timestamp 2:17 a.m., the footage captures Mr. Combs and Mr. Joe Williams engaged in a specific interaction that directly contradicts their sworn statements regarding both the nature of their relationship and activities central to the financial transactions outlined in Government Exhibits 23 through 29. As the prosecution prepared to play the video, the defense made one final attempt to delay, requesting the jury be temporarily dismissed while they argued additional objections. Judge Delaney denied this request, stating that any issues with the evidence could be addressed through proper cross-examination after its presentation. Court officers verified all monitors were functioning properly. Silence fell over the courtroom, and with a nod from Judge Delaney, Prosecutor Michaels instructed the technical staff to begin playback of what would prove to be the most consequential evidence introduced thus far in the high-profile case. "The government presents evidence item 47CE, announced Prosecutor Alina Michaels as the courtroom monitors displayed the FBI evidence designation screen. Hotel security footage, Four Seasons, Los Angeles, August 14, 2016, covering the period from 11:30 p.m. to 3:45 a.m. The video began playing, showing a standard hotel corridor with several suite doors visible. A timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m. The footage quality was remarkably clear for security videos, significantly better than the grainy, indistinct images often presented in court proceedings. Sean Diddy Combs appeared in the frame, accompanied by two individuals previously identified in court documents as members of his security team. One of the security personnel checked the corridor in both directions before Diddy entered Suite 1432. The security members remained outside, taking positions that suggested they were monitoring access to the room. At timestamp 11:59 p.m., Meek Mill appeared in the corridor alone. He approached the suite, spoke briefly with the security personnel, and was admitted. The video continued showing several individuals arriving over the next hour, some remaining for only brief periods, all checked by security before entry. The most significant segment began at timestamp 2:14 a.m. The security personnel temporarily left their positions, moving down the corridor, apparently responding to something off camera. During this brief window, the suite door opened and Diddy and Meek Mill emerged, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Though the security footage didn't include audio, the body language between the two men was unmistakably tense. Diddy gestured emphatically while speaking, occasionally pointing directly at Mill, who primarily listened with his arms crossed. At one point, Diddy placed a hand on Mill's shoulder in what appeared to be a firm grip rather than a friendly gesture. What happened next caused the first audible reactions in the courtroom. Diddy removed an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Mill. Mill opened it, briefly examining the contents before nodding and placing it inside his own jacket. The two men then engaged in what appeared to be a more relaxed conversation before returning to the suite. As this segment played, prosecutor Michaels paused the video. The government will establish through financial records and subsequent witness testimony that the contents of this envelope directly relate to transactions detailed in Count 6 of the indictment, specifically the initiation of a series of international transfers designed to conceal the origin and destination of funds connected to the enterprise described in the RICO charges. She resumed the video, advancing to timestamp 3:17 a.m. The footage showed Meek Mill exiting the suite alone. His demeanor appeared significantly different, more subdued and hurried than when he had entered, despite the late hour and the presence of security personnel who had returned to their positions. At 3:42 a.m., the final segment showed Diddy leaving with his security team and 3 additional individuals whose faces were temporarily obscured by the prosecution, pending their formal identification in court. Before the group left the frame, Diddy stopped and appeared to speak directly to a wall-mounted security camera, the same camera recording the footage being viewed. He pointed directly at it, then made a slashing gesture across his throat. As the video concluded, the courtroom erupted into murmurs and exclamations. Judge Delaney immediately called for order, his gavel striking sharply several times before quiet was restored. The jury will disregard any reactions from the gallery, he instructed firmly. You are to consider only the evidence presented, not how others may respond to it. Diddy's reaction to the footage was visible to everyone in the courtroom. His previous composed demeanor had completely dissolved. He sat hunched forward, hand covering his mouth, engaged in urgent whispered consultation with his legal team. One attorney appeared to be trying to calm him while another frantically made notes. Prosecutor Michaels approached the bench. Your Honor, the government would like to enter into evidence additional materials that directly connect what was just observed to financial records previously introduced as Government Exhibits 23 through 29. Objection, Your Honor. The defense has had no opportunity to examine this footage properly, verify its authenticity, or prepare appropriate responses. We request an immediate recess to consult with our client and examine this alleged evidence. Judge Delaney considered briefly before responding. The court will grant a 2-hour recess for the defense to review this evidence. However, I am denying any motion to exclude it at this time. The prosecution appears to have established sufficient authentication through Agent Rizzo's testimony regarding forensic verification. As the judge announced the recess, the courtroom remained charged with tension. Legal analysts present immediately recognized the potential significance of what they had witnessed, not just evidence that contradicted sworn statements, potentially exposing both Diddy and Meek Mill to perjury charge, but concrete visual documentation connecting the defendant directly to alleged financial crimes that had previously been established only through complex paper trails and testimony. The footage had transformed abstract allegations into something the jury could observe with their own eyes, a development that experienced court observers noted could fundamentally alter how the jury perceived both the defendant and the broader case against him. When court reconvened after the 2-hour recess, the atmosphere had transformed. Defense attorneys appeared visibly strained, having clearly spent the break in intense consultation with their client and likely reaching out to Meek Mill's representatives. Diddy himself had abandoned the confident posture maintained throughout previous proceedings, now sitting with shoulders hunched and gaze frequently lowered. Judge Delaney addressed both legal teams. I understand the defense has filed an emergency motion regarding the newly introduced evidence. We'll address that briefly before continuing with testimony. Defense Attorney Harrington rose. Your Honor, we maintain our objection to this evidence on multiple grounds. While we continue to question its authenticity despite the prosecution's claims of verification, our primary concern is context. This brief video segment, presented without proper background or explanation, creates a fundamentally misleading impression about a legitimate business interaction between music industry colleagues. He continued, should this evidence remain admissible, we request permission to call Mr. Williams as a witness to provide necessary context about the nature of his professional relationship with Mr. Combs and the specific interaction captured in this footage. Judge Delaney turned to the prosecution. Ms. Michaels, does the government have any objection to the defense calling Mr. Williams? Prosecutor Michaels responded, in fact, we welcome his testimony, as we believe it will provide valuable insight into the pattern of behavior outlined in our case. However, we would note for the record that Mr. Williams' previous sworn statement directly contradicts what is clearly visible in this authenticated footage, which may raise additional legal concerns for him personally. This subtle reminder of potential perjury exposure hung in the air as Judge Delaney ruled. The defense motion to exclude the evidence is denied. The motion to call Mr. Williams as a witness is granted. Now let's proceed with the prosecution's presentation of additional context for this video evidence. Prosecutor Michaels called FBI financial analyst Rebecca Chen to the stand. After establishing her credentials, Michaels directed Chen to explain the significance of the interaction captured in the hotel footage. Agent Chen, how does what we observed in the security video connect to the financial evidence previously presented in this case? Michaels asked. Chen referenced several charts displayed for the court. Based on financial records obtained through subpoenas, we can establish that on August 15, 2016, the day immediately following the hotel meeting, a series of transactions began that precisely match patterns alleged in the indictment's RICO counts. She detailed how funds moved from an account controlled by Meek Mill through 7 separate entities before ultimately being transferred to offshore accounts linked to Diddy's broader enterprise. What makes these transactions particularly notable is not just their complexity, which appears designed to obscure their origin and destination, but their timing and amounts, which directly correspond to events we've now observed in the hotel footage. Chen then presented communication records showing that within hours of the hotel meeting, Diddy had contacted 3 individuals previously identified as facilitators in the alleged financial scheme. These calls, the timing of the subsequent transactions, and now the visual confirmation of direct interaction between Mr. Combs and Mr. Williams establish a clear pattern that supports the government's contention that these were not legitimate business dealings, but rather part of the criminal enterprise described in the indictment. As Chen's testimony continued, she outlined what prosecutors characterized as a pattern of control allegedly maintained by Diddy over various artists, business associates, and employees connected to his enterprises. The financial analysis reveals a consistent structure, Chen explained, where individuals within Mr. Combs' orbit would receive significant financial benefits, career opportunities, investment in their projects, access to his network, followed by their participation, witting or unwitting, in transactions that benefited the larger enterprise while potentially exposing them to legal jeopardy. Chen testified that forensic accounting had identified at least 7 other artists besides Meek Mill who appeared to have been incorporated into similar financial patterns between 2014 and 2022. What we observe is a sophisticated system where legitimate business dealings create the foundation for and provide cover for transactions that violate numerous federal statutes. Throughout this testimony, Diddy's demeanor continued to deteriorate. Court observers noted that he avoided looking at the evidence displays, instead focusing intensely on notes he was writing and passing to his attorneys. His legal team appeared increasingly concerned, with multiple lawyers now taking turns attempting to calm their client, while others prepared for cross-examination. The prosecution's strategic introduction of the hotel footage had accomplished something significant. It had transformed what had been a complex, abstract financial crimes case into something concrete and visual that jurors could directly comprehend. The footage provided a tangible connection between Diddy's personal actions and the elaborate financial structures detailed in previous testimony. More importantly, it had shifted the narrative from one about potentially obscure financial regulations to a story about power, control, and manipulation, elements that jurors could more readily understand and evaluate based on their own experiences and observations. As this phase of testimony concluded, Prosecutor Michaels addressed what would become the central theme of the government's revised approach. The evidence will show that Mr. Combs didn't just participate in these activities. He orchestrated a system where his power and influence in the industry created both the opportunity for financial crimes and the leverage to ensure others' participation and silence. The hotel footage provides a rare glimpse into how this system operated behind closed doors, contradicting the public image and sworn statements designed to conceal it. The jury's attention remained fixed on the evidence displays, several members taking detailed notes. The transformation in how they appeared to perceive the case was palpable. From distant observers of complex financial allegations to engaged evaluators of human behavior, they could see and interpret for themselves. The prosecution's presentation of the hotel footage and its connection to financial evidence created a palpable shift in the courtroom dynamics. What followed, however, would transform an already significant development into what legal observers would later describe as a defining moment in the trial. During a brief afternoon recess, defense attorney James Harrington approached the bench for a private conference with Judge Delaney and lead prosecutor Alina Michaels. When proceedings resumed 15 minutes later, the judge addressed the court. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been informed that the defense has an announcement regarding their witness list and potential testimony. Mr. Harrington, you may proceed. Harrington stood, his typically confident demeanor noticeably subdued. Your Honor, after consultation with our client, we wish to inform the court that we have made contact with Robert Williams regarding potential testimony related to the hotel footage introduced today. Mr. Williams has indicated through his legal representation that he is willing to appear as a witness, but cannot do so until next week due to prior commitments outside the country. This seemingly procedural announcement caused Prosecutor Michaels to rise immediately. Your Honor, the government has reason to believe this request for delay may be connected to efforts to coordinate testimony. We have evidence suggesting multiple communications between the defendant's representatives and Mr. Williams immediately following today's revelation of the hotel footage. Judge Delaney's expression darkened. Mr. Harrington, is the prosecution's characterization accurate? Before Harrington could respond, an unexpected voice joined the exchange. Your Honor, may I address the court directly? All heads turned toward Diddy, who had risen from his seat despite his attorney's visible attempt to restrain him. Judge Delaney appeared momentarily surprised before responding with characteristic formality. Mr. Formality. Combs, while you have the right to address this court, I strongly advise you to consult with your counsel before doing so. These proceedings and anything you say are on the record. Diddy nodded but remained standing. I understand, Your Honor, and I've made my decision. His attorneys appeared alarmed, one placing a hand on his arm which Diddy firmly but politely removed. The courtroom fell completely silent as he continued. The footage shown today represents a legitimate business meeting that has been taken out of context. However, I need to address something more fundamental. He paused, seeming to gather himself before continuing. I have consistently maintained certain positions regarding my business practices and relationships throughout these proceedings. Today's evidence has made it clear that continuing that approach is no longer viable. His lead attorney stood. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client. Denied, Judge Delaney responded firmly. Mr. Combs has indicated his desire to address the court. He has been advised of his rights and the implications. He may proceed. He may proceed. Diddy's posture changed subtly, the carefully constructed image of the successful executive giving way to something more authentic and visibly conflicted. Your Honor, I've built my career in businesses on relationships and loyalty. I've demanded the same from those in my circle. The prosecution has characterized this as control and manipulation. Others might call it standard industry practice. He glanced briefly at the monitors where the hotel footage had played earlier. What's clear to me now is that regardless of how I viewed these relationships and transactions, continuing to contest every element of the government's case serves neither justice nor, frankly, my own best interests. A murmur spread through the courtroom before Judge Delaney's gavel restored order. Order. Oh, Mr. Combs, Judge Delaney said with measured caution, are you indicating a desire to change your plea in this matter? Not at this time, Your Honor, Diddy responded, but I am instructing my legal team to engage with the prosecution regarding potential resolution options. And I want the record to show that any further testimony from Mr. Williams should be evaluated with the understanding that our recollections and characterizations of certain events may have been influenced by considerations beyond strict factual accuracy. This carefully worded statement, essentially acknowledging potential perjury while avoiding direct admission, sent another shockwave through the courtroom. Prosecutors exchanged significant glances, clearly recognizing the substantial shift in the case dynamics. Judge Delaney addressed Diddy directly. Mr. Combs, the court acknowledges your statement. I will allow your legal team time to confer with the prosecution as you've requested. However, these proceedings will continue according to schedule unless and until a formal change in circumstances is presented to this court. As Diddy returned to his seat, the atmosphere in the courtroom had fundamentally transformed. What had begun as a procedural day of evidence presentation had evolved into what multiple legal observers would later describe as the breaking point in Diddy's defense strategy, the moment when the carefully constructed narrative maintained throughout pretrial proceedings and early testimony began to visibly crumble under the weight of concrete evidence that couldn't be explained away. The judge called a 1-hour recess to allow both legal teams to assess the implications of these developments. As court officers escorted Diddy from the courtroom, his previously confident stride was replaced by the measured steps of someone finally confronting the full gravity of his situation. When court reconvened after the recess, the transformation in Diddy's demeanor was immediately apparent. Gone was the business-appropriate attire and confident posture that had characterized his previous appearances. Instead, he sat with shoulders slightly hunched, his expression reflecting what courtroom observers described as resignation mixed with occasional flashes of barely contained distress. His legal team had clearly used the recess for intensive strategy discussions. Defense attorney Harrington launched an aggressive cross-examination, questioning the authenticity of the messages and suggesting alternative interpretations of their content. Isn't it possible, Agent Wilson, that these messages refer to legitimate privacy concerns that any public figure might have about hotel security footage? Wilson remained composed. While that's theoretically possible, when viewed in context with the financial transactions that followed and Mr. Combs' gesture toward the security camera visible in the footage itself, the evidence strongly suggests awareness of potential illegality rather than routine privacy concern. As this testimony concluded, Judge Delaney addressed both legal teams. Given the developments today and the ongoing discussions between counsel, the court will adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. I expect to be updated on the status of any potential resolution discussions at that time. In full view of the courtroom, an intense exchange occurred, with Diddy appearing to overrule his legal team's advice. He then turned to Judge Delaney. Your Honor, before we adjourn, I would like to make a brief statement, if the court permits. Judge Delaney considered momentarily before responding. You may make a brief statement, Mr. Combs, but I again advise you to consider carefully what you say on the record. Diddy nodded, then addressed the court with surprising composure, given the circumstances. I've built my career on the principle that perception creates reality. Today I've been confronted with the reality that perception can only carry you so far when facts emerge. I maintain that many aspects of the government's characterization of my business practices are inaccurate or exaggerated, but I acknowledge that the evidence presented today reveals actions and communications that are difficult to reconcile with my previous statements. He paused, appearing to carefully consider his next words. I've instructed my legal team to work constructively with the prosecution to find an appropriate resolution to these proceedings, one that acknowledges actual conduct without accepting every characterization the government has presented. I believe this approach serves justice better than continuing to contest every element of the case. This remarkable statement, essentially acknowledging culpability while preserving some dignity, fundamentally altered the atmosphere in the courtroom. It represented the moment when one of entertainment's most powerful figures publicly accepted that his influence had limits and that the systems of protection he had constructed were ultimately penetrable. As Diddy was escorted from the courtroom, the significance of what had transpired was evident to everyone present. The case had reached its turning point not through dramatic witness testimony or legal maneuvering, but through the silent evidence of a hotel security camera that had captured a moment its participants believed would never come to light. When Sean Diddy Combs exited the courtroom, he didn't resemble the confident music mogul who had built a billion-dollar empire spanning music, fashion, and spirits. His shoulders were hunched, his gaze downcast, his entire physical presence diminished by the weight of what had transpired. Court officers maintained their professional demeanor as they escorted him through the private corridor reserved for defendants, but even they seemed affected by the palpable shift in atmosphere. Outside the courthouse, news of the day's developments spread rapidly, drawing additional media presence and public attention. Legal analysts scrambled to contextualize the significance of what had occurred, with one prominent commentator describing it as the moment when the carefully constructed facade of invulnerability surrounding certain industry power brokers visibly crumbled in real time. By evening, multiple sources confirmed that intensive plea negotiations were underway, with Diddy's legal team working to secure terms that would acknowledge wrongdoing while limiting potential imprisonment. These discussions reportedly extended beyond the specific charges Diddy faced to include consideration of his potential cooperation regarding broader industry practices, a development that sent ripples of concern through entertainment executive suites across New York and Los Angeles. The impact extended far beyond Diddy himself. Within hours, representatives for Meek Mill issued a carefully worded statement indicating he was cooperating fully with federal authorities and reviewing his legal options regarding previously submitted statements. This diplomatic language barely concealed the reality that Mill faced potential perjury charges himself unless he could provide valuable information to prosecutors in exchange for leniency. Entertainment industry insiders describe the situation as creating a domino effect of concern throughout certain sectors of the business. Multiple high-profile figures reportedly contacted attorneys to assess their own vulnerability regarding past interactions with Diddy's various enterprises. One veteran music executive, speaking anonymously to a major publication, characterized the mood as tense recalculation of relationships and associations that seemed beneficial but may now represent significant liability. The hotel footage revelation proved particularly damaging because it undermined a central strategy of Diddy's defense, the argument that prosecution witnesses were unreliable or motivated by personal grudges against a successful Black entrepreneur. Visual evidence couldn't be dismissed as easily as testimony, and its emergence suggested that other supposedly deleted records might similarly resurface as the case progressed. Within the legal community, the focus shifted to analyzing how this development might affect the broader landscape of industry practices. Former federal prosecutor Ilana Washington, commenting on a legal analysis program, observed, "What makes this case potentially transformative isn't just what it might mean for Sean Combs personally. It's what it reveals about systems of influence and control that have operated behind the scenes in entertainment for decades. The hotel footage provides a rare, concrete glimpse into how business actually gets done when the participants believe no one is watching. For those close to Diddy's case, the immediate consequences were more tangible. Court filings the following morning confirmed that Marcus Reynolds, the former security chief referenced in the text messages about deleting hotel footage, had been taken into federal custody on charges of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. 3 additional individuals connected to Diddy's security operations were reportedly cooperating with authorities in exchange for consideration regarding their own potential legal exposure. Perhaps most significant was the effect on other ongoing investigations. Sources within federal law enforcement indicated that the techniques revealed in the Diddy case, particularly regarding how electronic evidence was handled and how potential witnesses were managed, provided valuable templates for examining similar patterns in other high-profile investigations that had previously stalled due to lack of concrete evidence or witness cooperation. Social media reaction reflected the complexity of Diddy's public image and legacy. While some fans expressed shock and disappointment, others pointed to long-standing rumors and allegations that had circulated for years, suggesting the revelations merely confirmed what many had long suspected but couldn't prove. Cultural commentators noted how the case highlighted the gap between carefully managed public personas and private behaviors in an industry